The Krelnath Dominion had been destroying civilizations for 3,000 years. Their massive war fleets moved through space like a plague, consuming everything in their path. 12 entire galaxies had fallen before them. Billions of lives had been harvested, turned into fuel and resources for the endless Krelnath war machine. They were perfect killers. Cold, efficient, unstoppable. The crystalline people of Vextar thought their technology would save them. They built shields made of light itself, defenses that could stop anything. The Krelnath studied their shields for 2 days, adapted their weapons and broke through. 6 days after the invasion began, 7 billion crystal beings were shattered and processed into raw materials. Their beautiful cities of living glass became dust. The Lumini were next. They were beings of pure energy who lived inside stars. They thought themselves safe in their stellar homes, unreachable by any physical threat. The Krelnath simply collapsed their stars. The energy beings were trapped in matter cages, screaming silently as they were harvested. 4 days from first contact to complete extinction. The Grendar Alliance was different. They were warriors, a federation of 200 worlds who lived for battle. When their scouts detected the Krelnath approach, they prepared for 50 years. They built fortress worlds. They created massive fleet formations. They swore blood oaths to stand together until the last warrior fell. They lasted 11 days. Every species followed the same pattern. First came fear when they detected the Krelnath ships. Then came desperate preparation. Then came the fighting, brave and fierce but ultimately meaningless. Finally came silence. Complete, total silence. No survivors. No mercy. No second chances. The Krelnath documented everything with cold precision. They recorded how each species fought, how they died, how long they lasted. It was all data. Every resistance was predictable. Every victory was inevitable. In 3,000 years, not one species had ever stopped them. Then their scout ships found a small yellow star with a populated world orbiting it. The species called themselves humans. The intelligence reports arrived at the massive Krelnath command ship. Fleet Commander Thomas Blackwood studied the data about this new prey. The humans were young, barely evolved past their home planet. They had a few small colonies scattered nearby, nothing impressive. Their technology was primitive, they still used chemical rockets and basic fusion engines. Their weapons were simple kinetics and nuclear devices, tools they'd originally designed to kill each other. Blackwood calculated their threat level: negligible. Strategic value: minimal. Time required for conquest: 6 hours, maybe less. But one of their colonies had value. New Sarajevo, they called it. A farming world with 2.3 million human civilians. Young population, healthy, perfect for harvesting. The genetic material alone would fuel Krelnath bioships for months. Blackwood made his decision quickly. This wasn't worth a full invasion fleet. Standard purge protocol would suffice. He assigned 1 dreadnought, his own command ship, and 3 support vessels. For ships to destroy an entire human colony. It was generous, really. Most species rated only 2 ships. The Krelnath fleet entered hyperspace. Blackwood didn't even bother monitoring the approach. He'd conquered 40 systems personally. This would be number 41. Routine. Boring even. He went to his rest chamber, expecting to wake up with another dead world added to his record. 3 days later, the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the new Sarajevo system. Sensors immediately painted everything. The colony world, orbital stations, civilian transport ships, mining platforms. All soft targets. Defenseless. This would be over before it began. But there was something else. One contact that didn't match civilian signatures. A warship. A single human military vessel sat in space, directly between the Krelnath fleet and the colony world. It was small compared to Blackwood's dreadnought, maybe 1/20th the size. The sensor readings showed an old design, decades out of date even by primitive human standards. Its hull was scarred and patched. It looked like it should be in a scrapyard, not a battlefield. The sensor officer provided details. Marathon-class heavy cruiser, he reported. Basic railguns and missile launchers. No exotic weapons. No advanced shields. Nothing that could threaten a Krelnath vessel. Blackwood stared at the lone ship on his display screen. It looked pathetic. Insignificant. And yet it sat there, engines hot, weapons powered, positioned directly in the invasion path. Then a transmission came through, translated by Krelnath computers. A human voice, calm and steady. Attention Krelnath vessels. This is Captain Robert Hayes of the United Human Space Force ship Indomitable. You are ordered to turn around immediately. Any advance toward New Sarajevo will be met with lethal force. This is your only warning. Silence filled the Krelnath command center. Officers looked at each other in confusion. Lethal force? From that tiny ancient ship? Then Blackwood laughed. It was a harsh, mechanical sound devoid of real humor. Lethal force? The humans were either insane or suicidal. Probably both. He opened a return channel. Human captain, your threat is noted and dismissed. You have one chance to survive this day. Power down your weapons and move aside. You have 10 minutes to comply. The response came back immediately, no hesitation in the human voice. Negative, Commander. The Indomitable holds this position. If you want New Sarajevo, you'll have to go through us first. Blackwood terminated the connection and ordered a full scan of the human ship. Surely they had something hidden. Some secret weapon. Some reason for this impossible confidence. The scans came back negative. The ship was exactly what it appeared to be, an old, outdated cruiser with conventional weapons. Nothing special. Nothing dangerous. Nothing that could possibly justify this suicidal stance. Perhaps they're buying time, one officer suggested. Waiting for reinforcements? Then they'll die while they wait, Blackwood said. He gestured dismissively at his tactical display. Send the Reaver. One support ship should be more than sufficient. Destroy that human vessel and proceed to orbital bombardment of the colony. The smallest Krelnath ship broke formation and accelerated toward the Indomitable. It was still 3 times larger than the human cruiser, with weapons that could reduce it to atoms in seconds. But the Indomitable didn't run. It didn't power down. It simply rotated slowly, presenting its weapons to the approaching enemy. And fired. The railgun rounds from the Indomitable streaked through space at incredible speed, slamming into the Krelnath vessel called the Reaver. The impact sparked against the alien ship's shields but did almost no damage. It was like throwing stones at a tank. Inside the Reaver, the captain barely noticed the attack. Return fire, he ordered casually. Disable their engines. We'll board them and take the crew for processing. But as the Krelnath ship lined up its weapons, something strange happened. The Indomitable suddenly released dozens of small objects into space, then fired its main engines at full power. Instead of running away, it was charging directly at the Reaver. Ramming attempt? The Reaver's tactical officer sounded confused. That's suicide. Our mass is 3 times theirs. The human ship passed within 200 meters of the Reaver at high speed. Then the objects it had released began exploding. They were simple chemical explosives, the kind humans had used for centuries. Primitive. Weak. The Krelnath shields absorbed them easily. But the explosions created a massive cloud of debris and shrapnel. And hidden in that debris were dozens of magnetic mines, crude weapons that looked like relics from an ancient war. The Reaver plunged straight into the trap. The mines locked onto the biomechanical hull with magnetic clamps and detonated. Shaped charges designed to defeat armor punched through weak points. One mine destroyed a sensor array. Another ruptured a fuel line. A third penetrated deep into the engine cooling system. Alarms screamed throughout the Reaver. The ship lurched as systems failed. Power flickered. The captain stared at his damage reports in disbelief. How had such primitive weapons hurt them? Aboard his command ship, Fleet Commander Blackwood watched his tactical display with growing anger. The Reaver was crippled, venting atmosphere and coolant, struggling to restore basic functions. How is this possible? Blackwood demanded. Those were chemical explosives. Magnetic mines. Technology from their early space age. His sensor operator studied the recordings carefully. Commander, they didn't rely on advanced technology. They used deception. They made us think they were attacking when they were actually setting a trap. We flew right into it because we assumed they couldn't hurt us. Blackwood's mechanical fingers tightened on his command throne. In 3,000 years, no species had drawn Krelnath blood in the opening engagement. Most died within the first hour. This single human ship had just crippled one of his vessels using tricks and obsolete weapons. The Indomitable had already disappeared into a nearby asteroid field, its engines cold, hiding among the rocks and ice. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Robert Hayes watched the damaged Krelnath ship struggle to recover. His face showed no satisfaction, only grim determination. This was just the beginning. Tactical, how long until civilian evacuation is complete? He asked quietly. Lieutenant James Miller checked his console. 17 hours and 40 minutes, Captain. The transport gates can only handle so many people at once. Hayes nodded slowly. 17 hours. He had to keep the Krelnath busy for 17 hours while 2.3 million people escaped through 2 transport gates. It seemed impossible. His communications officer spoke up hesitantly. Sir, Earth Command is ordering us to fall back. Admiral Carter says the defense fleet is coming but they're 12 hours away. He says we can't win this fight. He's right, Hayes said simply. We can't win. But that's not our mission. He stood and faced his bridge crew. They were good people. Young Lieutenant Sarah Parker at the helm, barely out of the academy. Old Chief Engineer Rebecca Stone, who'd served for 30 years and had 4 grandchildren waiting for her back on Earth. James Miller, his tactical officer and friend for 15 years. They all knew what Hayes was about to say. They'd all seen the numbers. 1 aging cruiser against a Krellnath dreadnought and support ships. It was mathematically impossible. We're not here to win, Hayes said clearly. We're here to buy time. Every hour we keep them busy is another hour for those civilians to escape. Every Krellnath ship we damage is 1 less ship attacking the colony. Our job is to make them cautious. Make them hesitate. Make them think twice about every move. Parker spoke up, her young voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. How do we do that, sir? We're outgunned in every way. We fight dirty, Miller answered before Hayes could. The tactical officer pulled up a star chart of the system. We use the terrain. The asteroid fields. The gas giants' rings. The comet clouds. We lay traps everywhere. We make them paranoid. Hayes smiled grimly. Exactly. Humans have been fighting wars for 10,000 years. We've learned every dirty trick, every ambush, every deception. The Krellnath have advanced technology but they're predictable. They follow patterns. We're going to break those patterns. Chief Stone's voice came over the intercom from engineering. Captain, I can rig the reactor to run hot. We'll get more speed and power but it'll burn out eventually. Maybe 6 hours before critical failure. Do it, Hayes ordered. We only need to last 17 hours. After that, it doesn't matter what happens to us. The bridge crew exchanged glances. They all understood what he was really saying. After 17 hours, the Indomitable would likely be destroyed. They would likely be dead. But 2.3 million people would be alive. Get me everything we have, Hayes continued. Old satellites in storage. Disabled freighters in the shipyards. Mining equipment. Sensor buoys. Anything that can be rigged to explode, broadcast false signals, or look like something dangerous. I want this entire system turned into a maze of traps. Miller worked quickly, coordinating with the few human assets scattered throughout the system. Within an hour they had a plan. Dozens of improvised weapons scattered across likely approach vectors. False fleet signatures broadcasting from empty space. Freighters packed with explosives positioned near key locations. Blackwood ordered 2 more vessels to hunt down the human ship. The Krellnath were coordinating now, moving in formation, scanning carefully. The Indomitable led them on a chase through the asteroid field, then past the rings of the system's gas giant where sensors were confused by radiation and particles. Every few minutes, another trap was sprung. An explosive here. A decoy signal there. Nothing did serious damage but it all added up. More importantly, it made the Krellnath slow down. Made them cautious. Made them scan every shadow before advancing. 2 hours passed. Then 3. The Indomitable was taking damage now, hit by Krellnath weapons fired during the running battle. Hull breaches were sealed. Wounded crew members were carried to the medical bay. The reactor was running at dangerous temperatures. But they were still flying. Still fighting. Still buying time. When a Krellnath support vessel got separated from the others, chasing the Indomitable through a debris field, Hayes sprung his biggest trap yet. A massive cargo hauler, supposedly disabled and drifting, suddenly fired its engines and rammed directly into the enemy ship. The hauler's fusion cores were set to overload. The explosion lit up space like a small sun. The Krellnath vessel was torn apart. Blackwood watched another of his ships die and felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Not fear exactly, but uncertainty. These humans weren't fighting like other species. They weren't using formations or tactics from military doctrine. They were improvising, adapting, using weapons and methods that made no sense. And somehow it was working. He made a decision. All vessels converge on my position. I'm taking personal command. We end this now. His 4-kilometer dreadnought began moving forward, weapons charging, shields at maximum. Captain Hayes saw it coming on his sensors and knew his time was running short. They'd bought 4 hours. They needed 13 more. All hands, he announced shipwide. This is the captain. We've hurt them. Now they're coming with everything they have. We've done well, but the hard part is just beginning. Hold the line. The crew responded with quiet determination. No cheers. No bravado. Just professionals doing an impossible job. The Indomitable turned to face the approaching dreadnought, and Hayes prepared his final moves. The Indomitable was dying slowly. Sparks flew from damaged control panels. Emergency lights flickered in corridors filled with smoke. The medical bay was crowded with wounded crew members, and Chief Engineer Rebecca Stone reported the reactor was running at 140% capacity. It wouldn't last much longer. Captain Hayes watched the massive Krelnath dreadnought approaching on his tactical display. The ship was enormous, for kilometers of biomechanical armor and weapons that could destroy planets. His own vessel looked like a toy in comparison. "Sir, we have multiple hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, Lieutenant Miller reported. Life support is failing in those sections. We've lost another 30 crew members." Hayes closed his eyes briefly. That brought their losses to over 200 dead. More than half his crew was either dead or too wounded to fight. But they'd bought 4 hours and 15 minutes so far. The civilians on New Sarajevo were still evacuating. "Take us toward the outer system," Hayes ordered. "Head for the old colony ship graveyard." Parker looked confused at her helm station. "Sir, there's nothing out there but abandoned ships from the first colonization attempts." "Exactly," Hayes said quietly. The Indomitable limped through space, trailing atmosphere and debris. The Krelnath dreadnought followed like a predator stalking wounded prey. Commander Blackwood could destroy the human ship easily now, but he wanted answers first. How had this primitive vessel cost him so much? When the Indomitable reached the graveyard, it slowed among the hulks of old colony ships. Dozens of them, abandoned for decades, floating dead in space. Blackwood opened a communication channel. His voice was cold as ice. "Captain Hayes, you've fought well for a primitive species. You've cost me 2 ships and several hours. But this is over. Your ship is crippled. Your crew is dying. Surrender now and I'll let them live." Hayes looked around his damaged bridge. Young Parker with burns on her hands from an exploded console. Miller with his left arm shattered from a falling support beam. Stone's voice on the intercom, hoarse from breathing smoke while she kept the dying reactor running. He opened the channel. "Commander Blackwood, I need to tell you something about humans. We've been at war for our entire history. Not just with other species but with each other. We've spent 10,000 years learning how to fight, how to kill, how to survive against impossible odds. We've perfected warfare in ways you can't imagine." Hayes paused, then continued. "You've conquered galaxies. But those species prepared defensively. They built shields and fortresses. They fought the way they thought they should fight. We're different. We fight dirty. We fight mean. We use every advantage, every trick, every weapon we can find. You're not facing a military force, Commander. You're facing survivors who refuse to quit." He closed the channel and looked at Miller. "Detonate the graveyard." Miller pressed a sequence of buttons. Throughout the field of dead colony ships, hidden charges exploded. But these weren't meant to damage the dreadnought. They were meant to push the old ships, sending them tumbling toward the Krelnath vessel. Blackwood watched dozens of massive hulks suddenly accelerating toward his ship. His tactical officer began destroying them with point defense weapons, but there were too many. Several slammed into his shields, doing minimal damage but creating chaos on his sensors. Then the real attack came. Hidden among the colony ships were cargo haulers, their fusion drives rigged to overload. As the Krelnath focused on the large targets, these smaller ships slipped through and detonated against the dreadnought's shields. Nuclear fire washed over the shields, draining their power. Blackwood's ship shuddered from the impacts. "Shields at 60%, his tactical officer reported. "No serious damage, but that human ship is escaping again." The Indomitable had used the confusion to retreat deeper into the outer system, heading toward the comet clouds at the edge of the star's influence. Blackwood was done with patience. "All vessels pursue and destroy. No more tricks. No more delays. I want that ship turned to atoms." The remaining Krelnath ships followed the Indomitable into the comet cloud, a dense field of ice and frozen gases billions of kilometers across. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Sensors scattered off millions of reflective surfaces. It was perfect ambush territory. The Krelnath spread out, searching carefully. Blackwood's third support vessel detected the Indomitable hiding in the shadow of a massive comet, engines cold, trying to hide. "Target acquired," the support vessel's captain reported. "Moving in to finish them." The Krelnath ship approached cautiously, weapons charged. The Indomitable appeared helpless, drifting, maybe already dead. The support vessel closed to point-blank range, preparing to fire the killing shot. Then Hayes gave one final order. "Fire everything at the comet." Now. The Indomitable's remaining weapons opened fire, not at the enemy ship but at the ancient comet beneath them. Missiles and railgun rounds tore into ice that had been frozen for millions of years. The comet exploded, releasing billions of tons of material directly into the path of the approaching Krelnath vessel. At the speeds both ships were traveling, even ice became deadly. The frozen chunks hit the Krelnath ship like artillery shells. Its forward shields overloaded instantly. Ice tore through armor plating. The ship's nose section disintegrated, shredded by the impact of countless frozen projectiles. The support vessel tumbled away, venting atmosphere and fluids, its crew dead or dying. 3 Krelnath ships destroyed. 6 hours bought for the evacuating civilians. But the Indomitable had nothing left. The reactor was critical. Weapons were empty. Life support was failing throughout the ship. 200 crew members remained alive out of 847. Hayes received the final damage report from Stone. Her voice was weak, probably from radiation exposure in the failing engine room. "Captain, the reactor will breach in 30 minutes. I can't stop it. We need to evacuate." "Negative," Hayes said. "We still have 9 hours to buy. The civilians aren't finished evacuating." "Sir," Parker said softly from the helm. "How? We're out of weapons. Out of tricks. The ship is falling apart." Hayes looked at his tactical display. The Krelnath dreadnought was emerging from the comet cloud, weapons glowing with power, shields fully charged. He knew what he had to do. Had known from the beginning, really. There was only one weapon left on the Indomitable. The ship itself. "Set course directly for that dreadnought," Hayes ordered. "Maximum velocity. Override all safety protocols on the reactor. Rebecca, I need everything you can give me. Every last bit of power." Silence fell over the bridge as the crew realized what he was ordering. A ramming attack. Suicide. Miller spoke first. "Sir, even if we hit them, we probably won't penetrate their shields. The dreadnought is too large." "Probably," Hayes agreed. "But maybe we'll damage them enough to make them retreat. Maybe we'll make them cautious enough to delay their attack on the colony. Maybe we'll buy a few more hours. That's all we need. A few more hours." Parker's hands trembled as she entered the course. "Course laid in, Captain." Hayes sat in his command chair and activated the ship-wide intercom one final time. "All hands, this is the captain. We've fought well. We've hurt them badly. But we have one last mission. In a few minutes we're going to ram that dreadnought. Some of you might want to reach out to loved ones. Send final messages. You have 5 minutes." Throughout the dying ship, crew members sent quick messages to families, to friends, to anyone who mattered. Short goodbyes. Final words of love. Hayes recorded his own message to his daughter on Earth. Then he looked at his remaining bridge crew and smiled sadly. "It's been an honor serving with you all." Stone's voice came over the intercom, weaker now. "Reactor at maximum. We're ready, Captain. For New Sarajevo. For Earth. For everyone we're saving today." Hayes gave the order. "Helm, execute." The Indomitable accelerated toward the massive dreadnought, and Hayes prepared to make his final stand. Across human space, the news spread at light speed through communication relays. One aging cruiser, the Indomitable, was holding the line against a Krelnath invasion fleet. Against impossible odds, Captain Robert Hayes and his crew had destroyed 3 enemy warships and bought 6 precious hours for civilian evacuation. The story reached every human colony, every space station, every ship. People gathered around communication screens, watching the tactical feeds in stunned silence. Children asked their parents if the Indomitable would survive. No one had the heart to tell them the truth. Admiral William Carter commanded the sole defense fleet from his flagship, racing toward New Sarajevo at maximum speed. He'd pushed his ships beyond every safety limit, burned fuel reserves that would leave them stranded if this went wrong. But they were still 9 hours away. His flag captain, Commander Patricia Morgan, studied the tactical data streaming in from New Sarajevo. "Sir, the Indomitable is down to 200 crew. Life support is failing. Weapons are depleted. The ship won't survive another engagement." Carter stared at the holographic display showing Hayes's battered cruiser and the massive Krelnath dreadnought. The size difference was absurd. It was like watching a wounded dog face down a bear. "Can Hayes hold for 9 more hours?" Morgan asked quietly. Carter had served with Robert Hayes 20 years ago. They'd been junior officers together, fought pirates in the outer colonies, shared drinks and stories. He knew Hayes better than most. "No," Carter said honestly. "The ship is finished. By every tactical calculation, Hayes should already be dead. But he'll try anyway. That's who he is. In the new Sarajevo system, the Indomitable accelerated toward the Kralnath dreadnought. Inside the dying human ship, alarms screamed. The reactor temperature climbed into critical ranges. Metal groaned under stress it was never designed to handle. Lieutenant Sarah Parker gripped her helm controls tightly, tears streaming down her face as she held the course steady. Behind her, Lieutenant Miller worked his tactical station with his one good arm, routing every bit of remaining power to forward shields. It wouldn't be enough, but it was all they had. In engineering, Chief Rebecca Stone lay on the deck near the reactor, too weak from radiation to stand. She watched the temperature gauges climb and whispered instructions to her young assistant, keeping the failing system running for just a few more minutes. Commander Blackwood watched the approaching human ship with growing unease. His tactical computers had predicted every action the Indomitable would make, and they'd been wrong each time. The humans fought without pattern, without logic, using methods that shouldn't work but somehow did. Now they were charging directly at his dreadnought. It was obvious suicide. His shields would hold easily against the impact. His weapons could vaporize the human ship before it even reached him. But what if this was another trick? What if they had some hidden weapon they hadn't revealed yet? What? Commander, recommend we destroy them now, his weapons officer said. They're in optimal firing range. Blackwood's finger hovered over the firing authorization. One button press and the human ship would cease to exist. But he hesitated. That hesitation was born from 6 hours of watching this single vessel do the impossible again and again. The delay cost him 43 seconds. The Indomitable came on, faster now, its hull glowing red from the stress of maximum acceleration. Inside, Hayes watched the distance close and made his final calculations. Rebecca, on my mark, overload the reactor. Shape detonation, all energy focused forward. James, transmit our logs to Earth Command. Make sure they know what happened here. Miller's fingers moved across his console. Logs transmitted, sir. Full tactical data on the Kralnath included. It's been an honor serving with you. The honor was mine, Hayes said. He looked at young Parker, still holding the course despite her tears. At Miller, wounded but steady. At the names of his dead crew scrolling across a memorial display. Every single one of you. I'm proud to have commanded you. Stone's weak voice came through the intercom one last time. Reactor ready for overload, Captain. Detonation will be shaped forward like a spear. If we're going to die, we'll die making it count. For New Sarajevo. For Earth. For every human who'll live because we stood here today. Hayes activated the ship-wide channel. All hands brace for impact. And thank you. Thank you for everything. The Indomitable crossed the final 1,000 kilometers in seconds. Blackwood finally gave the order to fire, but it was too late. His weapons charged, but the human ship was already there, smashing into his forward shields at 40% of light speed. The collision alone would have destroyed the human ship. But Hayes had one final card to play. Rebecca now. In engineering, Stone triggered the reactor overload with her last strength. The containment fields collapsed in a precisely controlled failure, directing all the reactor's fury forward in a shaped nuclear explosion. It was an old human weapons concept, turning a simple explosion into a penetrating lance of energy. The detonation lit up the new Sarajevo system like a newborn star. The Indomitable ceased to exist, every atom vaporized instantly. But its reactor's dying scream became a spear of nuclear fire that punched through the dreadnought's forward shields and tore into the command tower. Blackwood had 1 second to realize his mistake before the blast wave hit his command center. Then he and his entire senior staff died as the explosion ripped through the heart of his ship. The Great Harvester's biomechanical systems screamed and failed. Without Blackwood's direct control, without central coordination, the massive dreadnought began to die. Secondary explosions rippled through its length. Power failed. Life support collapsed. The ship that had destroyed 40 civilizations tumbled through space, bleeding atmosphere and bodies. The remaining Kralnath support vessels panicked. Without their commander, without orders, they scattered. Some tried to flee. Others fired randomly, hitting each other in the chaos. And Admiral William Carter's fleet dropped out of hyperspace right in the middle of them. 40 human warships against confused, leaderless Kralnath vessels. Carter saw the burning dreadnought, saw the debris field where the Indomitable had been, and understood what Hayes had done. All ships, Carter transmitted, his voice hard as steel. For the Indomitable. For Captain Hayes and his crew. Make them pay for every meter of space. Show them what happens when you threaten humanity. Attack. The human fleet fell on the Kralnath like wolves on wounded prey. Railguns fired. Missiles launched. The Battle of New Sarajevo's second phase lasted 27 minutes. When it ended, the Krelnath fleet was destroyed or fleeing into hyperspace. New Sarajevo was safe. The last civilian transport had passed through the evacuation gates 5 minutes earlier. 2.3 million people had been saved. But 847 souls were gone, vaporized in that final brilliant explosion. Carter stood on his bridge and saluted the debris field where Hayes had made his stand. Around him his crew did the same. Throughout the human fleet, on every ship, crews stood at attention and honored the dead. On New Sarajevo's surface, 2.3 million people looked up at the sky and wept. They were alive because 847 strangers had chosen to die for them. Because one captain had drawn a line in space and refused to move. In the cold mathematics of war, it was a favorable trade. 847 lives for 2.3 million. But Carter knew that Hayes had never thought of it that way. Hayes hadn't calculated odds or measured values. He'd simply seen people who needed protecting and decided that their lives mattered more than his own. That, Carter thought, was what it meant to be human. To stand between the innocent and harm no matter the cost. The Indomitable had held the line. And humanity would remember. 6 months after the Battle of New Sarajevo, the Krelnath Dominion High Command gathered in their central chamber. It was a massive room built from biomechanical materials, pulsing with dim light. 12 council members sat in a circle, reviewing data for the 40th time. The same recordings played again on holographic displays. The Indomitable limping through space, setting traps, fighting with primitive weapons. The final kamikaze run. The nuclear detonation that killed Fleet Commander Blackwood and crippled their greatest dreadnought. One ship, Council Member Vrath said, his mechanical voice echoing. A single outdated vessel held our fleet for 9 hours using chemical explosives and suicidal tactics. Not just tactics, another council member corrected. Creativity. Unpredictability. Adaptability. They improvised constantly. Changed methods. Refused to follow patterns. Our algorithms couldn't predict them because they didn't follow logic. They followed instinct and desperation. The High Commander accessed casualty projections and displayed them for all to see. The numbers were disturbing. One human ship had cost them 4 vessels, including a dreadnought and a fleet commander with 3,000 years of experience. Extrapolate, the High Commander ordered. If one human ship inflicted these casualties, calculate the cost of invading their core systems. The combat AI ran simulations. The results appeared in cold numerical data. To conquer Earth and its 12 billion humans would require 70% of the Dominion's total military strength. Estimated casualties, 45% of all Krelnath forces. Duration, 8 to 12 years of continuous warfare. And that assumed the humans didn't develop better weapons during those years. Didn't adapt. Didn't learn. Based on what they'd seen, the humans would learn very quickly. Unacceptable, the High Commander stated flatly. In 3,000 years, no species has cost us more than 5% casualties. These humans would destroy nearly half our forces for a single star system. They fight differently than other species, Vrath observed. Other civilizations build defenses and wait. They react. Humans attack. They take initiative. They accept death if it means hurting the enemy. Every one of their soldiers is potentially a suicide weapon. Another council member pulled up historical data from the human transmissions. Their own history supports this. 10,000 years of warfare. They've fought each other with every weapon imaginable. Nuclear, chemical, biological. They've burned their own cities. Poisoned their own land. They understand warfare at a level we've never encountered. The recordings showed human history. Ancient battles with swords and spears. World wars with millions dead. Cities destroyed by their own nuclear weapons. They were a species that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times but always survived, always adapted, always kept fighting. Proposal, the High Commander announced. Classify humanity as Category 7 threat status, asymmetric warfare specialists. Avoid direct conflict. Establish non-aggression boundary around their space. Offer formal treaty. The vote was unanimous. The Krelnath Dominion, conquerors of 12 galaxies, would avoid humanity. Not because they couldn't win eventually but because the cost was too high. Some prey wasn't worth hunting. The treaty was transmitted to Earth 3 weeks later. The Krelnath would stay out of human space. Humans would not pursue Krelnath vessels. Both species would maintain the peace. Earth's government accepted, but they understood the real message. The galaxy's most feared enemy had blinked first. One ship's sacrifice had bought humanity not just survival, but respect through fear. On Earth, construction began on a monument at the United Human Space Force Academy. It took 4 months to complete. The monument was a perfect replica of the Indomitable carved from black granite, 20 meters tall, positioned at the Academy's main entrance. 847 names were engraved on the base in gold lettering. Captain Robert Hayes, Lieutenant Sarah Parker, Lieutenant James Miller, Chief Engineer Rebecca Stone, and 843 others who'd stood with them. The inscription read simply, "They stood between extinction and survival. They chose to stand. Let the galaxy remember, humanity does not yield." Admiral William Carter attended the dedication ceremony. He was older now, his hair completely white, his uniform heavy with medals from the battles that followed New Sarajevo. But he stood straight as he addressed thousands of cadets assembled before the monument. "The Battle of New Sarajevo taught the galaxy 2 truths," Carter said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "First, that humanity will fight with everything we have to protect our own. We'll use any weapon, any tactic, any sacrifice necessary. Second, that courage isn't about winning. It's about refusing to let evil pass unopposed regardless of the cost." He gestured to the towering granite ship. Captain Hayes and his crew knew they couldn't win. Every tactical analysis said they'd die in the first hour. But they stood anyway. They bought time with their lives. They turned their ship into a weapon when they had nothing else left. Because of them, 2.3 million civilians lived. Because of them, the Krelnath learned to fear us. A young cadet raised her hand. "Sir, would you do the same thing? Would you sacrifice your ship and crew?" Carter looked at the 847 names glowing gold in the sunlight. He thought of that day racing through hyperspace, knowing he'd arrived too late. Watching the Indomitable's final moments on his tactical displays. Every officer in this fleet would do the same, cadet. That's what the uniform means. That's what service means. We draw a line and say, no further. Then we hold that line whatever it takes. The Indomitable held against an enemy that had never been stopped. They held until their ship was destroyed and every one of them was dead. That's the standard. That's what we aspire to. The cadet nodded, and Carter saw in her eyes the same determination he'd seen in Hayes' final transmission 9 months ago. "Remember their names," Carter continued. "Remember what they did. And when your moment comes, when you face impossible odds and certain death, remember that someone has to hold the line. Someone has to stand up and say, not today, not here, not while I still breathe." The Indomitable held that line. Now it's your turn to hold it. Across human space, the story became legend. Children grew up hearing about the ship that couldn't win but refused to lose. Military academies studied Hayes' tactics. Poets wrote verses. Musicians composed songs. The Indomitable became a symbol of human defiance. And when Krelnath ships encountered human vessels in the decades that followed, they remembered. They remembered the outdated cruiser that destroyed a dreadnought. They remembered the crew that turned themselves into a weapon. They remembered the line that held. And they turned away. In the cold void of space, near where New Sarajevo orbited its sun, a memorial beacon floated. It transmitted continuously, a simple message repeating every hour in every known language. Here stood the UHSF Indomitable. 847 souls held this position against impossible odds so that millions might live. They held the line. They paid the price. Remember them. Honor them. And when evil comes calling, stand as they stood. Yield nothing. Fight to the last. Make them remember your name. The beacon would transmit for 1,000 years. A permanent reminder that humanity, when pushed to the edge, would push back. That humans would sacrifice everything for each other. That some lines could not be crossed without a terrible cost. The Indomitable was gone. But the line it held would stand forever.